open session. And in order to stay consistent, we're going to take that item first. So that will be the agreement with the Firefighters Union Local 2398. Marie and Russ, you want to join us at the table? First and foremost, we'd like to thank you for the work that you did in working with the firefighters to reach consensus. And we'd like to thank the Firefighters Local as well. It's our understanding that the individuals who represented the Firefighters Union were thoroughly professional at all times and genuinely pleasurable to work with. So thank you for that, gentlemen. Perhaps you'd like to just give us a thumbnail sketch, and we'll just take it from
Be
there.
happy to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Marie and I are members of the Hingham Personnel Board. We negotiated with the Firefighters Union for a period of about a year and a half. This took, beginning in July of 2017 and concluding on November 1st. We had 9 sessions with the firefighters, and we thoroughly reviewed issues that were of interest to both sides, issues for the town, issues for the firefighters. The contract that was agreed upon and has now been submitted as a Memorandum of Agreement has been ratified by the Firefighters Union at a vote last Friday, I believe it was, and it's been submitted to the Board of Selectmen for their review and approval. It provides for some economic enhancements to the existing collective bargaining agreement, which did expire at the end of June of 2017. And the new agreement will be effective July 1 of 2017 and will be good for 3 years. As has been in the case in most of the union contracts negotiated by the town over the past several years, there's a 2% general wage increase effective each year of the contract. So that would be July 1, 2017, 2018, and 2019. That is retroactive for the firefighters, for those at least who were firefighters on the date of ratification, and for those who have retired. So that's the principal enhancement to the contract. There are several other economic enhancements built in, probably the most significant of which is that the so-called shift differential, which is paid to firefighters, is an enhancement to reflect weekend work, night work, hazardous work. That's been increased. It had been 3.9%. It is now moving to 4.5% in the first year of the contract, 4.7% in the second year, and 4.9% in the third year. And that's based on a FS2 level, which is basically the firefighter with a paramedic certification. Probably the third most important enhancement is that we did with the firefighters what we did with the police officers and the police patrolmen, which is that there is a physical fitness stipend now available of $1,000 per firefighter. They have to take a physical fitness test based on the so-called Cooper standards. And the town feels, as we did with the police and as we do with the fire, that there's really some benefit to both sides in having a physically fit and healthy force. There was some modest upgrades in the uniform allowance and in the stipends for various EMS supervisory positions that are detailed in the MOA. There were some benefits to the town in terms of how certain vacation requests were handled, and in phasing out, hopefully, the fire alarm work over the next year and a half. So all of the fire alarms are removed from the town of Hingham by the end of this contract, and we will not need those positions. I would echo what the chairman has said, that it was a pleasure to deal with Paul Hines, who was the labor union attorney who led the firefighters. Chris Melanson, the new union president, led the members, Colby Wilcox, David Levinson, Rich Connolly, and Michael Kraus. It was a pleasure to work with all of them. They were very professional throughout, and I thought it was a respectful process. It was also a pleasure to work with Chief Murphy, who became chief, I believe, on March 1st, but was a part of the negotiating process from the beginning. Former Chief Bob Olson was a major part of the process until his retirement in March, but it was very, very useful to have the involvement of former Chief Olson and Deputy Chief Murphy, now Chief Murphy, in supporting this process. So we're happy to recommend this to the Board of Selectmen. We think it's a good agreement and will stand the town well for the next 3 years.
Very nice. Thank you, Council. Do my colleagues have any questions?
I would just say, you know, I'm reminded every time I do a contract, I have a note in my phone of a Board of Selectmen meeting when the late Nelson Ross came before the town and spoke about a contract. And he talked about the characteristics of a successful negotiation. And he talked about mutual respect and trust. He talked about a fair process and a fair outcome. And I think collectively, with the union and with you folks, that was achieved. And just very, very grateful, not only for that, but, you know, when you meet the fire and emergency management people, it's usually that there's a problem in your family, with a friend, or something. And the professionalism and the capability of every member of the firefighting team, I think, is something that we should all feel very proud of. And I know that when we've had had a circumstance where we've had to call, we feel like we're in excellent hands. And Chief, thank you for, you know, you and your team and all that you do to keep this community safe and to help people when they call you and they need it.
No, and following up on that, you know, Murray and Russ, we trust that you, as Mary said, sort of are the standard bearers for the town in this process, and I think bringing that to the table kind of raises that expectation of professionalism on all sides. You know, once we leave the table, we live and work in this community together, and we care about our workforce, but we're mindful of the economics, and, you know, we appreciate you kind of bringing that spirit, I think, to these negotiations, and we're pleased with the contract that you've recommended.
Thank you.
I would also, I neglected to mention the role of Tom Mayo, who was with the negotiating team from the beginning as acting town administrator and then town administrator, and we relied on Tom's judgment very much in the decisions we took, and I apologize for leaving you out of my initial remarks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I do appreciate all the hard work and effort that you put into this, not only in this matter, but in the other matters that you've represented the town.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to sign the Memorandum of Agreement with the Firefighters Union Local 2398, effective July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
This time, I'll entertain a motion to sign the side letter agreement with the Firefighters Union Local 2398 and the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, moving on. We have no minutes I'm aware of.
I didn't see any.
Yeah, okay. Public comment on items not on the agenda. All right, 73 Abington Street. I see a lawyer in the audience.
It's a neat thing to say.
Sorry about
that. My name is Walter Sullivan, and I represent the property owner and applicant for a building that a school is being built at 73 Abington Street by MDC Properties LLC. It's adjacent to property owned by Fox Rock. I'm here to request that you deny our application to open up your street, Abington Street, and go 1,300 feet to connect to a water line by insistence of Aquarian. The school is approximately, it's a 10,000 square foot building. It's about 75% complete, and we have been struggling about getting water to the site. We can't do a well because it's a school. There is a hydrant a very short distance that's on Fox Rock's property. They're willing to give us an easement to connect to it. We were told by Aquarian that that's not allowed, that we'd have to get a denial letter from the town. Mr. Sylvester was more than happy enough to supply us with that letter indicating that there's a moratorium on the road, I think through 2021, and it would not be granted for us to disturb the road. Aquarian said that the letter had to come from the selectmen. So hence, I wrote Mr. Mayo a letter and asked if I could have some time. And so I am asking that you deny our request to open into Abington Street and disturb the road for 1,300 square feet. And I argued very strenuously for it at the record of the gentleman.
Some say I'm pretty good at saying no. Unless
All I have to
the
say
board
is,
has something to
Yeah.
say.
I would just take this opportunity to remind the citizens of Hingham that we have a road building program, and we're taking everybody's tax dollars to improve the roads in Hingham. And when you cut into a road, you degrade the quality of that road, and that's why we have a 5-year moratorium. Over the last 6 years, 24% of Hingham's newly paved roads have been opened for emergency water repairs, which degrades the quality, and in terms of the investment we're all making in our infrastructure, it's getting in the way. I think this board has oftentimes, we do not allow streets to be opened unless there's a real hardship, and we've had a number of individual hardships. So I think you have, it sounds like the easier thing to do is to connect through Fox Rock. They are willing to do that. So let's go ahead and do that.
I'll entertain a motion to deny the request of the owners of 73 Abington Street to excavate into Abington Street, which is on the 5-year moratorium.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right.
It's government at its finest right now.
Let's see if the next one goes as smooth. All right. Greetings and salutations, ladies, gentlemen. At this point, we're going to discuss the, what's been referred to as the compressor station. So we'll take comment on that item, perhaps have some discussion. I know that there are members from a town-appointed board. I'm not sure if they're in the audience. They are in the audience. So I think before we open it up generally, it give the town-appointed board the opportunity to speak. If anyone on that board so wishes, you can go to the table over there, just identify yourself by name and address, and whatever input you feel is appropriate, you're welcome to do so. You're welcome. Greetings.
Hi, I'm Kristen Casey in Flintlock Circle.
You,
Joshua Ross, 125 Wampatuck Road.
Mr. Ross. Bob, does that mic pick up these folks? Yep. Okay.
Great. So
All right, what would you like to say?
we wanted to take this opportunity, since we were last before the board in July, since it's been a number of months, we just wanted to take the opportunity, since we had been informed that this may now be something that the board was considering, to reiterate the recommendation that we had made earlier this year. Since its formation this last year, the task force has really worked to follow the charge we received from the board, which was to focus only on issues related to the compressor that were potentially impactful to Hingham, and to alert the board to ways in which the town could take part in the public process related to the proposed construction. That said, the task force recommends that the town apply as an intervener with the Mass Department of Environmental Protection related to its issuance of an air quality permit for the proposed compressor. As the board is aware, this air quality is one of 2 local permits that are needed in order for construction of the compressor to commence. Numerous issues have been raised with regard to the air quality assessment conducted by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and contained in their environmental assessment. For example, there are questions regarding accuracy, as air quality samples were taken from a location in Harrison Avenue in Boston, and the accuracy that those might provide. Also another example, questions regarding the reporting methodology because pollution levels were reported as averages, which when doing so, that can fail to identify potential spikes, which could then cause burying a particular day where a particular level may in fact be over an appropriate threshold. Recognizing some of the serious concerns and questions surrounding the air quality and public health in the Fore River area, and some of these questions that were being raised, Governor Baker put a stay on the issuance of the air quality permit and directed the Department of Public Health and Department of Environmental Protection to jointly prepare a focused health impact assessment. The purpose of this assessment was meant to document the current background air levels at the site and the incidence and/or prevalence of relevant health conditions within the community, and also to consider the future air quality impacts of the project on public health. As the board is also aware, the Commonwealth requested that Hingham send 3 representatives to participate in the steering of this public health impact assessment and requested permission to place an air quality monitoring can in Hingham due to the town's proximity to the compressor site and the potential that Hingham air quality could be negatively impacted by the project. The potential for the compressor to impact Hingham air quality is further supported by Algonquin's own air dispersion modeling report. This report was submitted in Algonquin's application to FERC, and in that report, it acknowledged that areas within 10 kilometers of the compressor station will in fact be affected by the normal operation of the compressor. The compressor station task force therefore recommends that the town should apply for intervenor status with the Department of Environmental Protection regarding the issuance of this permit. If the town's application is accepted as intervenor, it will ensure the town is kept apprised of all information relating to the permitting process. It also gives the town standing to participate in an appeal should the town determine there is a need to do so in the future. Based on the research done by the task force, the application process consists of submitting a letter from the town explaining how the town is potentially impacted, as well as a minimal filing fee. Filing for the status does not obligate the town legally or otherwise to take any additional action. It merely preserves the town's right to do so in the future. There is a finite amount of time for the town to do this, as once the DEP takes action regarding the permit, the window to file will be closed. We appreciate your consideration of what the task force believes is a measured and Hingham-specific step to preserve the town's right to protect the town and its residents against potential negative impacts of the proposed compressor.
Are there any other towns that have intervenor status?
I don't know about the standing that the other towns in the area have and in what way they may be participating in the permitting process.
Well, how is it that the town of Hingham has intervenor status?
Well, we don't right now. We're proposing that we
But I mean,
apply for it.
Okay. So there's nothing with respect to the distance between the site and the town boundary that is limiting our ability to file for intervenor status?
No, I don't think
Could
there's
the town
any.
of Cohasset do it, or Situate?
I mean, that's really, my understanding is that would be up to the Department of Environmental Protection and that they would assess. I don't have exactly what I know town council was looking into the process. I don't have exactly the regulatory requirement for application, but it would be an assessment on a part of the DEP if the town in fact qualified. My recollection is that it was, the explanation of it anyway was a fairly low bar. It was a number of people that were potentially going to be impacted by the air quality. I don't have that in front of me, but I can get it to you.
Did your work see you identify anything with respect to a particularized harm to the town of Hingham that was different than Weymouth or Quincy?
No, I think the way that we were looking at it was more that there was a potential for an impact to the town, so that it would be in the town's best interest to preserve its right in order to be able to take part in the process again, if and when there was a determination that there was a need to do so.
You may have that opportunity shortly, sir.
So,
So the only other thing I would add is that when we presented back in July, is that we did indicate there were some things for other towns that were more important than it may have been for Hingham, such as, the noise level, that sort of stuff that was directly impacted the neighborhoods right by the compressor station in Weymouth or Quincy. So one of the things that we looked at is, well, what are the things that are going to be impacted by Hingham? Now, the air quality clearly is going to be presented on Thursday night,
Right.
which I understand, I think a number of people are going to go to that presentation, so we'll see what they come back with. I know like Kristen just said, the initial report was a little vague, to say the least. So the other thing that we had said is that if there happened to be a event at the site, right at the bridge, what happens? You know, who knows? But if there was a incident like there have been across the country in other compressor station type structures, you know, we're talking about evacuations and explosions and releases into the air. As one of the main entrances and exits into the town, I mean, there is a potential for a huge, you know, logistical, economic, not to mention the resources on the town to help out in case of an emergency. So those are the things that we looked at, not necessarily, you know, structurally, if something happens, God forbid, there, it's not gonna, you know, may not affect us, but we are in close enough proximity that it's gonna affect us somehow.
Yep. Let me, so, and I think, Paul, what we heard in July were a couple of things. We heard that given where this is in the process, if Hingham wanted to engage, the opportunity that's remaining is the air quality. And I think what the task force is saying is, and by the way, of the different potential impacts, there's potential impact in Hingham, so it kind of fits. One of the things, and I've chatted with Kristen a couple times over the last few weeks. One of the things that, you know, as I went back and, you know, I looked at sort of, you know, when there's been intervention, when communities, especially if there's a multi-community effort. So, you know, if I think about the Green Bush, the town of Hingham kind of carried the banner for the South Shore. When we have rate cases like the water rate case that we just went through with Aquarian, Hull joined in as an intervener, which meant that we split the cost of things. So I guess as I look at intervener, and I understand that, you know, that the initial recommendation was this preserves the town's right to engage. And I think I hear you saying that's a simple process. I guess the way that what I'm trying to think about is that it's been my experience that when a community files for intervener status, they're essentially signaling to the other communities and to the body that it's petitioning that we're jumping in. And while I know that wasn't part of the initial charge of the work, one of the things I'm trying to get my arms around is what would Hingham's role look like, and where would we be additive to this process? Because you know, that's an important consideration. And how could we do this in a way that we understand what we're committing to? And you know, litigation can be long, and you know, I'm just trying to get my arms around some of that. And you know, I know you met last week. I don't know if you have any information or perspective that, you know, Kristen, as I indicated to you a couple weeks ago, you know, that to me is kind of what we're thinking about here. So I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I don't think so. I think based upon what you initially, you know, charged us with, which was a good list, and you know, we feel like we did our best to meet those requirements, is that given where the process is right now, for lack of a better term, this is the way for Hingham to get your foot in the door. So I think as a group, you have to decide for the town, is this something that you guys want to be involved in? Because I think this is the easiest, simplest step along the way. Because as I mentioned before, on the other side of the local stuff is the federal lawsuit. And so if the Court of Appeals comes back in that lawsuit and says, all right, Algonquin, you did make some mistakes with your permit, we have to open up one of the 7 things that they are, there is another opportunity. So I think if this is, if the local stuff is sort of the low-hanging fruit for Hingham, you know, we talk about if we don't do this, I don't know how we're gonna get involved into a whole federal lawsuit. So I think you gotta look at it as, where does the town wanna go with it? Going down the road is, you know, again, there's the local stuff which we can get involved in now, and if, say, if those permits get approved, and then there's the federal that comes back, and then there's another opportunity for Hingham to get involved, I think you need to take a look at, okay, if there's an opportunity on the federal level, I think we're talking more, you know, bigger scope than what we're talking about on the local level.
And I
So-
appreciate that the federal piece, that one is a little bit out of our control, so,
Well, and that, I would just Josh makes a good point about just really making sure that we're clear on what we're talking about when we talk about intervenor status, and it really is just solely related to this local Massachusetts
narrow-
air quality
yep.
permit with the Mass DEP. So it does not give us, it really doesn't, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is not doing anything that then obligates us any further. And I understand that there may be a perception, but it really, in fact, legally does not obligate us any further than this. And again, with the information that we had provided in July, the Algonquin themselves said that the regular action of the compressor station, when it's normally not in the case of something catastrophic, but the everyday, normal, healthy workings of the compressor is going to impact Hingham's air. And our suggestion at this point is that it would be in the town's best interest to preserve our rights related to the air quality permit in case there is an appeal down the road, that the town would have standing to participate in that if the town decided that was necessary. As far as the federal appeal that's out there, those are the bigger, kind of the bigger issues. You know, one thing that we really talked about a lot and that came up a lot in our meetings was safety and the bridge. And that was something that we talked quite a bit about, and we definitely heard from other people that there was a concern there. That question, I think, is really in the federal appeal as far as whether or not FERC may have violated the Natural Gas Act by putting a combustible project in that proximity to that bridge. If through the appeal process that's remanded and that gets opened up again in that federal process, we may have a different recommendation at that point as far as whether or not the town may want to reassess its participation in that larger issue and its impact to the town. But where we are right now, I think we're at a pretty finite point just related to air quality, and that right now, it isn't bigger than that.
yeah, thank you.
Karen?
Well, I think, to me, some of the discussion that we've had and maybe some of the questions that we've asked you are more properly put to town council. And I think we have gotten some information from Carrie Ryan on kind of the menu of options that might be available to an intervener. You know, this isn't my area of law, but I do think that it runs the gamut of essentially preserving your rights and making a filing and doing nothing more than that, all the way up through, depending on how you see the rights of the town being affected, all the way up through participating, you know, more fully in the litigation. I think that, I guess I have been somewhat frustrated by the pace of this, in that I just never saw any harm in at least preserving our rights, at least as that step. I don't think that it costs us anything. I don't think that we have to do anything further. I think that's what Carrie said. The issue that was important to me in making the filing was that the communities around us with which we would be, or alongside we would be joining this process, understood that we were still kind of evaluating the breadth and depth of that role. So I guess I think we have articulated in prior letters that we did see harm to Hingham in the development of the compressor station. And to me, it sort of logically followed from that we would at least preserve our right to appeal. And again, I'm out of my depth here, but one of the things that we may want to appeal might be with respect to the air quality monitoring, depending on where they put the air quality testing sites and how they, collect that information, may or may not be the most accurate representation of how the air quality could be affected by the compressor station. So at least in the kind of initial proposal, it seemed like those sites were removed from us and may not be, again, the most accurate assessment of how we could be damaged by the location of the compressor station at that site. So I don't know. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, what kind of catastrophic events have occurred in other comparably sized compressor stations?
Everything from major gas leaks to total explosions.
And those total explosions that you've described, where did they occur and what was the damage?
So from what I can remember, and they're all online, I know a couple of big ones have happened in Pennsylvania, but they've been in the middle of nowhere. And
That's the issue.
so that's the issue. So my understanding is this compressor station is in the most populated area that a compressor station is in the whole country.
Yeah.
Well, and Josh, didn't then Senator O'Connor sponsor legislation that has now passed the legislature that would create a sort of a better boundary or prohibit the location of compressor stations in just the location this
I do
station?
remember reading something that some of the local representatives and congressmen have been trying to file, whether it's, passed or not.
And the reality is federal preemption's a tricky thing, too, as far as.
But at least the state can express its desire, right?
Right, and so everyone from the local level to the, our, state senators and state representatives up in Washington have all sort of weighed in on this and are against it. I know there's stuff in the news about where Governor Baker stands, but almost all of the local and national representatives are against this.
Yeah, and I don't think, I'm not speaking for me, I don't think I've heard anybody say, I think this is a really good idea and this is a great place. It's a terrible place for it. I think what, and I'll just speak for myself, but the question I've been asking myself is, would Hingham's involvement bolster the opposition to the compressor station? Would we bring something to the party that would enhance our collective ability to prevent or mitigate the impact of this terrible project? And
Or say it another way, if we don't step up, what does that say about it?
right,
Well,
yes,
that's why I asked about Braintree.
and
because I
and
think they would be.
Yep.
I think, to me, the way I've been coming at this is, it's clearly, it's not a great project, so, and some of this that, again, just kind of by way of explanation, I feel like I'm spending taxpayers' money here, so we take that pretty seriously. As you just saw, we spent 18 months negotiating a fire contract, because we think about that pretty carefully. And so what we like to be able to say is, this is where these resources are making a difference. And so does it help the overall effort, and does it better position Hingham? So, for example, does us as an intervener, does that better position us for monitoring and mitigation down the road? Those things would be compelling. Does Hingham's involvement mean that additional, in an appeal of an air quality permit, does that mean that we can bring some resources to bear to strengthen the argument? Those things to me are compelling, because I also see that we have some neighboring communities that are pushing on this pretty vigorously. And so I'm just trying to figure out where kind of we fit in, not because I think it's a good project, but just where can our presence make a difference? If there are, I'm making this up, if there are 5 communities that have signed on as intervener, does the addition of a 6th Does that bolster the argument? That's kind of what, that's kind of the way I'm approaching some of this, because while I understand that we're not legally obligated to do anything if we file as intervener, I do think it sort of sends a signal. And as I think, Kristen, I may have said to you, if Bob Hedlund calls Tom the next day and said, great, you're in, what do you want to do? We got to be able to answer that question.
But I think we can also,
Bob hasn't called.
yeah, Bob has a call. And I think we can also be very clear about what our parameters are at this stage. And if there were to be, if the air quality permit were issued and we saw that there were direct effects on Hingham, like I posited, they didn't, we don't believe they properly tested our air quality. We have another bite at the apple to say, is it worth allocating resources to track that down, or do we simply continue to be a participant in the process, be informed of the process, and stand with the South Shore communities that are more directly affected by the compressor station? I don't think we need, to me personally, I don't think we need to answer all those questions. I think we need to be clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it today, and understand what rights that gives the town on a going forward basis.
Do we have any idea how much Quincy and Weymouth have laid out in legal costs to date on this thing?
I don't. I can tell you asked about the, which towns have intervened. Obviously, Quincy and Weymouth are in. Another point I just wanted to lay out there, you asked about the process for filing and what impact an intervener community would need. And I've been told by Attorney Ryan that as part of the filing letter, you need to identify the impacts to the community and what they would be. So if Cohasset or Situate were to ask to, or file to be intervener, they would need to lay out what their impacts would be. The other thing I wanted to just remind everyone was that as we're talking about the alphabet soup down in Washington and of course up here at this, in Boston as well, back in April we did issue a letter voicing our opposition to this, to the construction of the compressor station, to Coastal Zone Management, MEBA, and FERC. And then more recently, here in July of 17, we issued a similar letter to the Department of Transportation for the safety issues.
Yeah.
So this is the air quality
Do
permit
you know
issue.
if there's been any experts retained for purposes of analyzing that issue by the
I don't
town,
think
cities
you
of
guys have
Weymouth or
covered
Quincy?
it.
No, but my understanding is that when we keep talking about this air quality, it's, the meeting on Thursday night is really a health impact, so they're taking into account more than just the air quality, is my understanding. So they're looking at other things such as noise in the area, and I would imagine safety would be transportation and the bridge.
Have they retained experts in any of those areas to speak to that issue?
I do not know. I haven't been going to, we have other members who are.
Do you have any sense as to whether or not the cities of Quincy and Weymouth are being less than diligent in pursuing this issue?
From what we have seen, I don't think they've been very diligent in, from what I've seen, and again, we
Any
haven't been
stones
to.
left unturned?
I don't think we've looked at it enough to comment on what Weymouth and
I just don't think we've
Quincy-
looked at it from that perspective.
Right, we were
I think
just
we
looking
looked
at
at
it
it really from how is Hingham impacted and what can Hingham do? We didn't focus on what everyone else.
Well, do we have an understanding of, the air currents and whether or not a release from a plant of this nature would travel in such a way that it would bypass the city of Weymouth and come into Hingham?
I don't know that anyone's suggesting it would bypass Weymouth and come to Hingham. I think
But it
we're
will come to
focused on
Hingham.
that it would in fact come to Hingham was really the
At some
focus of
point.
our.
Right, so if you just look at some of the events I was talking about in the past year or two, Hingham is, I think, 2.2 miles away, the closest part of Hingham is 2.2 miles away from the compressor station, or somewhere close to that. They've evacuated 5, 10 square miles around when these things have occurred. Now, if you're in the middle of a cornfield, 10 miles is, but if you're here, 10 miles includes Hingham. So.
Same size structure?
Yeah, I think they're all pretty standard, and from our research, it's a pretty standard building and the parts and how it pushes the gas through and, yeah.
And it's, if you think about it, it's the 3A corridor, you've got Foster School that's involved, you've got the shipyard. I mean, I think.
We've got an estuary there, we've got.
What I think, what's, where I think we're sort of at with some of this, and, the task force has done some great work, and we've had interested residents have been doing great work, and I think what they're sort of telling us is that after this health impact assessment meeting on the 15th, in pretty short order, a decision is due on this air quality permit by January, and I think what the board is being told, which is very helpful, is, hey, guys, your window of opportunity, if you want to engage in this, is closing. And so it seems like we're at a point where if the board wants to engage in this process, we need to do it because that window is closing. And I think we thought maybe, having some discussion before the meeting on Thursday would help inform those who are attending, help inform the board.
I think was one of the other issues whether there might be mitigation. Let's say this goes forward and Algonquin's forced to pay mitigation, a la Greenbush. Is that only available to entities that have intervened in the process, for instance?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I'm not sure if there would be mitigation similar to Greenbush. I would.
Have to be an intervener in order to qualify for mitigation if you're affected. I don't know.
I don't know.
To me, there would be
I think it's
monitoring.
Yeah, whatever. I think it's a process point for me, and I'm really having a lot of trouble understanding why we wouldn't reserve our rights, and I think that we have every control over where that goes and how it goes. And to your point, I think it's absolutely true that we would need to be very clear. Informally with other communities about, the role we intend to play. And at this stage of the game, I think my interest is just preserving the rights of the town of Hingham as
Procedurally.
Procedurally, that's correct.
As opposed to substantively.
Well, we're an intervener.
Sure.
So at this stage of the game, we're just in the process.
It's like
and
the
then,
guy that gets the pleadings but never shows for the depositions.
yeah.
But I think you also want to say, if it is the
But you may
inequality,
show, you may end up showing.
Right, no.
you want to make sure that you have a say in that they are doing it correctly. So we've had a lot of discussions in our group about, okay, how are we looking at this? Technically, all the filings have been, it's been discussed. They've been doing everything by the book, so it becomes not a philosophical issue, or it's more of a social issue for some of this stuff. But for the air quality, you want to make sure that they're doing it right. That's why you want to kind of have a seat at the table. Are they putting the canisters in Hingham so that if something happens, you know that it's in Hingham and not on Harrison Boulevard in Boston, and then saying, oh no, it's not going to affect Hingham. But you want to make sure that
Pre and post development.
it was just, they did it right. And that's what we're talking about.
Is the view that you're speaking to uniformly held by the committee?
Yes.
Is the intervener status? The 100% of the committee said, yes, we should do intervener status.
And then what you're positing, though, would be a resource allocation issue, would be a resource decision, because if they award the permit and we think their analysis is flawed with respect to the placement of the canisters, let's say, we'd have to come back to the table and we'd have to figure out, what it would cost us, whether we're willing to do it. So, I do understand that once you put your foot in the door, you're then going to be faced with, we'd be faced with additional questions of what do we do next? And, to me, then it becomes more of an analysis of what the other towns are doing and what the other towns are contributing, because they're, I think, more directly impacted by the issues. But I guess I still don't think that's a reason to turn away from intervener status.
Why don't we invite other members of the audience to participate? Thank you both very much for briefing us on that. That was very helpful. Is there anybody else who would like, I know Dr. Bledsoe wanted to add his 2 cents, but can we do ladies before gentlemen, or is that rude? Oh, she had her hand up. Yes, ma'am. Just identify yourself by
Yes.
name and address,
Hi,
please. Thank you.
Jennifer Mathian, 159 Stainer Drive, also the president of the Hingham Residents Against the Compressor. So many things I want to say now.
Take your time.
So I think it's important to recognize that there will be some unknowns. There are some unknowns. For example, if we intervene, how much is Hingham on the hook financially, time-wise, et cetera? Hopefully.
Great question.
Hopefully, since the task force made its recommendations back in July, you've gotten some sort of range from council regarding that. However, can we give you an exact answer? No, and council probably can't either, correct?
Well, that's between us. Go ahead.
You know, there are a lot of other unknowns, though, like Selectman Power said, how much will Hingham joining this battle as an intervener move the needle forward in this ultimate fight against the compressor? How much? It's an unknown.
Yep.
Regardless of the many unknowns, I urge you to focus on what we do know. And specifically, we know that the gas company itself and the state's Department of Environmental Protection and the state's Department of Public Health has, in writing, indicated that this is a Hingham problem. So my question to you as our town representatives, given that knowledge, is it appropriate to relinquish our legal voice in the only way we are able to voice it? In a matter that will likely, regardless of scope or scale, impact Hingham constituents in terms of safety, health, environment, and economy. I strongly feel as though there is a responsibility to intervene, to maintain and preserve our voice in the very limited way that we are allowed to do so. And I strongly feel that it would be a great disservice to our town as it stands currently and our town in the future if you don't decide to do that.
Thank you.
I would also just like to clarify for you, and I might have one of my colleagues come up too if I don't do the best job, because one of us is a non-practicing attorney, and I'll let you know that that's not me. But so filing as an intervener, you can only do that if you are substantially and specifically affected by the decision. So we can file, and DEP could say, no, we don't accept your filing. They've already said on record that we're affected, so most likely that wouldn't happen. But that's the reason why Hingham as a town could intervene. We can't intervene in just anything. There are only certain cases that are even open to intervene in. And this is the one, we're talking about the air permit specifically and only because that is how we as a town are impacted. If that
Thank
makes
you
sense.
very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Bledsoe. Good evening, sir.
I'm Turner Bledsoe, in residence at Linden Ponds.
How are you tonight?
Good.
Good.
I'd like to bring up more that I've talked about in the past. The latest IPCC report on global warming has been released in October. I will be giving you some highlights of that. What I think is the most important thing about the compressor station is that it is destined, if it's put in place, to make it not possible for Massachusetts to meet its Global Warming Solutions Act targets. But worse than that, you have to realize, and I would say that that has been shown in a detailed study by the analysis group. The IPCC report is pointing out that we are truly in a significant crisis about global warming. The projection is that we're on a track to have a temperature above the Industrial Revolution start of 1.5 degrees centigrade. We are already at 1 degree centigrade. We will be at 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2030. The implications of that are very serious. And the most significant thing in the report is they've shown by the modeling that we will not be able to bring the temperature back to 1.0 degrees without putting in place a technology that doesn't now exist at a functional level. We would have to reduce, we would have to be able to take carbon out of thin air. This is entirely different than carbon capture in a smokestack. So that there is not a technology to do that. So the implications are we are at a very severe threshold. We've passed the point of no return to 1.0 degrees centigrade heat. So it's going to be worse than it is now. And I think you all know the details of that. So the recommendation is that we transition away from fossil fuels as rapidly as possible. Now, if the compressor station goes through, we're committed to continuing the use of natural gas for 30 years. Natural gas is the most potent global warming gas. And it's not just what comes out of the compressor station, but feeding that natural gas to the compressor station involves immense amount of leakage of free methane at the site of extraction. So I think it's if you want something that's really tangible that is going to impact the future of Hingham, that compressor station is very bad. And I think we ought to do everything we can to oppose it.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to add to the conversation?
Good
Yes.
evening, Elizabeth Moltz at 70 Winter Street, and I just want to reiterate what everybody has said so far, and also to say that in the gas company's new plan of the compressor station, it is, I think, bigger than it had been previously. There is actually room for more equipment in there, like 5 more compressors in there. So it looks, and this is speculation, that they are, building with an eye towards expansion at some point. I think prevention is definitely key here versus trying to put the genie back in the bottle. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay.
Just
Certainly.
2 quick things. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's here. And, Paul and Karen, I think you're aware, but the men and women in this audience care deeply about this subject and have spent hundreds of hours attending meetings, getting up to speed, and engaging in something that's really important. And my hat's off to you and thank you, because that's really significant. I think one of the things you may be seeing tonight in our discussion is that all 3 of us, we kind of come at this from different perspectives. Some of it depends on sort of, our profession, our life experience, but part of what we all try to do is to have conversations like this to inform our thinking and, to just really kind of figure out what the best path is for all of us to go forward. And, I would just say that I appreciate the emails and the comments and the information, and the Hingham residents against the compressor station prepared a really helpful couple-page document that we all read really carefully. So, I know we're not making any decisions tonight. I would just say thank you that this really kind of helps inform decisions. And part of the reason we sometimes bring up some of the concerns we have are, not to be a downer or to say, hey, we don't want to go that way. It's to say, help us figure out how we're looking at this. Help us look at this in a slightly different way. We do that with each other. And I think our government works best when we have, citizens that are involved as well. So thank you for giving us a lot to think about tonight.
So where do we go from here? What's the, I'd make a motion, but I've done that before and never followed up on. Yeah, no, I was. But I'd like to understand when that would be entertained, sir.
Well, as I understand it, there's going to be a meeting later on this week that's going to be attended by our public safety, Board of Health officials, and I'd like to see the outcome of that.
Okay.
I will say that I'm more persuaded than I was coming in here that the request you're making is not totally unreasonable under the circumstances, in particular you, madam. My problem and what I'm grappling with is, the genie in the bottle in terms of the legal costs that the town would incur, and I'm trying to figure out what that really means. And I'm still working through that. So if you ask me tonight about it, you wouldn't enjoy the answer, but let me continue to grapple with it.
I'm going to suggest that we put this on our agenda for a decision next week. Sure. I think we're going to get the information on the 15th. We're going to have people that are informed, and I think at that point, we're not going to have any more information. And, again, there's some uncertainty in all this, but I think we need to make a decision next week, because after that, a decision could be made for us.
Right, and to Paul's point, maybe we get some additional. We've gotten kind of a sketch from Attorney Ryan. Maybe we put a little more color around those options, so that we have a better handle on the range of resources, at least at the outset for this. So
I'd like to thank the work that you have done on this. At one point in my life, I was more focused on planning, but now I'm focused on money. And I'm just, I don't want $1 million legal bill. I just don't. But we'll work through it. So, on that note, I see a hand. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
How are you, Doc?
Thank you. Dr. Olivia Lana, 109 Fitzroy Drive in Hingham. First, I want to say I felt your heart for the first time on this issue tonight at this moment, and I wanted to thank you for that, because I didn't know where it was until this moment. And I guess what I want to share is I think the people of Hingham, if they understood more what is going on, they will help solve your problem. I truly believe that. I can't tell you at how many social events, whether it's been in 1 or 2 people or many people, many of them with ample ability to help in circumstances like this, when they understand what's going on, they want to help. So I guess that's what I would propose, is that education is everything. And I see it every day with patients, but I don't want to take cholesterol meds. I know, but then you have to do this or your artery is going to look like this. So it's that same, like, just stop and pause about what we're talking about here, and to allow them to fully understand what a compressor station truly means. Because after it's here, game's really tough to fight back. Like, there's no doubt we will have to leave the shipyard. Like, that's not a question. So this is such a special place, and I just fear you're never going to get it back. And everyone who would understand that would help you. And I'm so grateful that you are so careful with our money. Like, truly, I really mean that.
You're welcome.
And I never understood that that's what you were doing. And it was great to hear you saying, we're coming from these other perspectives. So this process of people listening to one another and really, like, that's what the process is about. So anyway, thank you. And I just think education, I'd be sure any of these people would meet in town groups to educate people and help them listen. And when they heard that you heard the cause, you have a lot of power. So, well, you may not think so, but I think it's different. So there's a lot of people that know all of you, and if you said, hey, let's just listen to this, how can we as a town raise the money to protect us? I think there's going to be a big response.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, I want to thank you all for coming in. You don't have to leave, but we're going to move on to,
Let me just leave you the IPC summary.
Thank you so
thank you
much.
very much.
Paul, do you mind if I
Sit
jump in
down.
just for a quick second?
Sorry?
Just want to say one thing.
Sure.
So we have a room full of very engaged residents. I just want to remind you all, there are talent bank applications on the website. Feel free to reach out and join the team.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Night.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. Righty, what do we got left?
Easy matter. All right. Well, we've got some appointments.
Can I recommend that you might consider wanting to maybe vote the LEPC as presented?
Yes. All right.
I was going to let Mary make that motion.
I'll
It's about
entertain a
10
motion
minutes.
to appoint the following members to the Local Emergency Management Planning Committee as they appear on the list in the proposed vote for tonight, November 13th, 2018. Essentially, these are just individuals from different departments, boards that will be tasked with responding to local emergency management planning, principally led by the police and fire, of course. So,
So moved.
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll entertain a motion to appoint Mary Ann Blackmur to the Veterans Council for a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2021.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Welcome to the Veterans Council, Mary Ann. I'll entertain a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day all-alcoholic beverages license to Mary Ann Blackmur. There she is, on behalf of the Hingham Community Center for Paint Night with Margaret Costello to be held at the Hingham Community Center on Wednesday, November 14th, 2018, from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right. Well, that concludes the agenda items for November 13th, 2018. Michelle, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, Thomas?
Not tonight.
Karen?
I'm all set.
Mary?
I just want to, this past Sunday, the town celebrated Veterans Day. The board had the opportunity to participate in the ceremonies held here at Town Hall, and we thank our Veterans Services Officer and everyone who was involved in that. We were also guests at Linden Pond for a celebration in the afternoon that was equally moving, and I just want to give a shout out to my colleague to my left. I said to Paul Healy on Sunday that while I'm proud to sit next to him every day, I don't think I was more proud of him than I was on Sunday. And I know that the remarks have been provided to the Hingham Journal. Carol, I hope they will be run. And I know that they're posted on social media, but I would urge people to take a few minutes and just read and reflect on some very powerful messages. I was just really glad to be present for it, and
Thank you.
job well done.
Thank you. I drew upon a lifetime here in the community, from a young boy to a gray-headed guy that's sitting here before you tonight. And it was with some trepidation that I made those remarks, because I just wasn't sure how it was going to be received. It was a bit lengthy as well, so it kind of went on. But what was said from the heart, and I meant every word of it. And I just feel that this is such a great community to live in. I really love living here. So with that, we'll take a motion to adjourn and wish you all good night.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye. Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.